The hand came out of nowhere, fingers clamping around Maybel Perkins' wrist like a steel trap. She didn't even have time to pull away before Kang Min-ho yanked her toward him, his expensive cologne choking the air between them. The entire sixth floor of Taehyun Holdings went silent. Keyboards stopped clicking. Phones stopped ringing. 23 employees froze at their desks, watching the scene unfold like witnesses to a car crash they couldn't prevent. "You've been ignoring my calls," Min-ho said, his voice low and controlled, the kind of control that preceded violence. His grip tightened until Maybel felt her bones grind together. 3 days. 3 days of silence, and you think that's acceptable? Maybel's breath caught in her throat. She could feel every eye in the office burning into her skin, could hear the collective intake of breath, could sense the questions forming in their minds. This was her fiancé. This was the man she was supposed to marry in 6 weeks. This was the man who was currently bruising her wrist in front of her colleagues like she was property he'd temporarily misplaced. "Min-ho," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady, trying to maintain some shred of dignity. "This is my workplace. Can we please? I don't care where we are." His other hand came up, fingers digging into her shoulder, pulling her closer. "When I call you answer. When I text you respond. Do you understand me?" The office door to the executive suite opened. The sound was soft, almost delicate, but it cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Every head turned. Maybel's heart stuttered in her chest because she knew who that door belonged to. She knew who was about to walk out and see this humiliation, this degradation, this complete destruction of her professional reputation. Kang Ji-Taehyun stepped into the common area. The new CEO of Taehyun Holdings was exactly as the rumors described him, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Maybel's annual salary, with a face so controlled it could have been carved from ice. He was 32 years old but carried himself with the authority of someone who'd spent decades building empires. His dark eyes swept across the frozen office, taking in the scene with the kind of analytical precision that made people nervous. He didn't rush, didn't run, didn't raise his voice. He simply walked toward them with measured steps, his expression betraying nothing. "This is my workplace," Ji-Taehyun said when he was 3 feet away. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried the weight of absolute finality. Min-ho's grip on Maybel's wrist loosened slightly, surprise flickering across his features. "Excuse me. You heard me." Ji-Taehyun's gaze dropped to where Min-ho's fingers were still wrapped around Maybel's arm. "This is my workplace. You're disrupting my employees. You're creating a hostile environment. And you're touching my staff without consent." The air in the office went from tense to explosive. Maybel felt Min-ho's entire body go rigid beside her, felt the shift from entitled anger to genuine fury. She knew that tone. She knew what happened when someone challenged Kang Min-ho's authority in public. "Do you know who I am?" Min-ho asked, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I know exactly who you are." Ji-Taehyun took another step closer. He was taller than Min-ho by perhaps an inch, but in that moment, he seemed to tower over him. "Kang Min-ho, heir to Daehan Industries, son of Kang Yong-soo, currently violating workplace safety protocols in my building. This is my fiancé," Min-ho spat, his grip on Maybel tightening again, making her wince. "What happens between us is none of your concern. She's my employee." Ji-Taehyun's hand moved so fast Maybel barely tracked it. One moment Min-ho was holding her wrist. The next Ji-Taehyun had knocked his hand away with enough force that Min-ho stumbled backward. "Which makes her safety my concern. You have 10 seconds to leave this building before security escorts you out." The silence that followed was deafening. Maybel stood frozen, her wrist throbbing, her entire world tilting on its axis. No one spoke to Kang Min-ho like that. No one touched him like that. No one challenged him in public and walked away unscathed. Min-ho straightened his jacket, his face a mask of cold fury. His eyes moved from Ji-Taehyun to Maybel, and in that look, she saw everything that was coming. The punishment, the retribution, the consequences of this public humiliation. "You just started something you won't be able to stop," Min-ho said quietly. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator, his footsteps echoing in the absolute silence. The elevator doors closed. The office remained frozen for another 10 seconds before the whispers started. Low and urgent, spreading like wildfire. Maybel stood in the middle of it all, her wrists still burning, her heart hammering so hard she thought she might pass out. Ji-Taehyun turned to look at her. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes made her breath catch. "Are you injured?" "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice came out shaky and weak. "You're not fine." He glanced at her wrist where red marks were already beginning to darken into bruises. "Go home for the day. Take tomorrow off as well. HR will handle the paperwork." "Sir, I can work." "That wasn't a request, Miss Perkins." His tone gentled slightly. "Go home. Make sure you're safe. We'll discuss this on Monday." He walked back to his office without another word, leaving Maybel standing in the center of a workplace that would never look at her the same way again. She gathered her things with trembling hands, aware of every whisper, every stare, every judgment being passed. By the time she reached the elevator, her phone was already buzzing with messages. The first was from her mother. "Are you okay? Your father just got a call." The second was from her younger brother. "Minho's people are outside my school." The third was from an unknown number. "You embarrassed him. That was a mistake." Maybel's hands shook as she read through them. This was exactly what she'd feared. This was exactly why she'd agreed to the engagement in the first place. This was exactly why she'd spent 2 years walking on eggshells, answering every call, responding to every text, sacrificing every piece of herself to keep her family safe. And now, because some CEO had decided to play hero for 30 seconds, everything was about to fall apart. She made it to her car before the first sob broke free. Sitting in the parking garage of Taehyun Holdings, Maybel Perkins let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes. Then she wiped her face, started the engine, and drove toward her parents' house, knowing with absolute certainty that the real nightmare was just beginning. The shop was destroyed. That was the first thing Maybel saw when she pulled up to her father's small electronics repair business at 7:30 that evening. The front window had been smashed, glass glittering on the sidewalk like malicious diamonds. The security gate had been ripped half off its hinges. Inside, she could see her father standing amid the wreckage, his shoulders slumped in a way that made him look decades older than his 58 years. Her mother stood beside him, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other wrapped around her father's arm. When they heard Maybel's footsteps on the broken glass, they both turned. The look on their faces made her stomach drop to her knees. "Maybel," her father said, his voice rough with exhaustion and grief. "You shouldn't have come." What happened? She already knew. Of course she knew. But she needed to hear it. Needed to understand the full extent of the damage. "They came about an hour ago," her mother said, tears streaming down her face. 3 men. They said the loan was being called in immediately. They said we had 72 hours to pay back the full amount plus interest or... Her voice broke. "Or what?" Maybel whispered. Her father moved deeper into the shop, his feet crunching on broken equipment. 500 million won. That's what they're demanding. The original loan was 200 million. But with interest and penalties accumulated over 5 years. He trailed off, picking up what had once been a computer monitor. Now it was just shards of plastic and broken circuits. Maybel felt the world tilt. 500 million won. In American dollars, that was roughly 400,000. An impossible sum. A debt they'd been managing monthly payments on. A debt they'd been told would be forgiven completely once she married Minho. "The wedding," she said numbly. "The agreement was that the debt would be cleared when we married. That was the deal." "The deal is void," her father said quietly. He pulled a letter from his pocket, the paper crisp and official, bearing the Daehan Industries letterhead. "According to this, you violated the terms of the engagement by allowing another man to assault Minho in a public setting." Maybel's blood ran cold. "He assaulted me. Ji-Taehyun was defending me. They don't care about the truth." Her mother's voice was hollow. "They care about their reputation. And now they're saying that because you humiliated him, because you stood by while their heir was disrespected, the engagement is in jeopardy. Unless what? Her father's hands clenched around the broken monitor. Unless you publicly apologize to Min-ho and agree to move the wedding date up to 2 weeks from now. They want you to quit your job immediately and move into their family compound to prepare for the marriage. If you do this, they'll forgive the debt and stop the retaliation. Maybel's knees went weak. She grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself, her mind racing through the implications. Quit her job. Apologize for being grabbed and humiliated. Marry a man who treated her like property. Move into a compound where she'd be completely isolated from her family, completely under their control. And if she refused, her family would be destroyed. Her father's business was already in ruins. Her mother's health was fragile. The stress alone could trigger another cardiac episode. And her brother. Where's Seo-jun? She asked suddenly, ice flooding her veins. Her parents exchanged a look that told her everything she needed to know. He's fine, her mother said quickly. He called 30 minutes ago. He's fine. But what? He said there were men following him when he left school. They followed him all the way to his friend's house. They didn't approach him, didn't touch him, but they made sure he knew they were there. Maybel closed her eyes. Seo-jun was only 19. A university student studying engineering with a bright future ahead of him. He was innocent. He had nothing to do with any of this. And now he was being used as leverage, as a threat, as a weapon to force her compliance. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. Asterisk, your brother looks good in that blue jacket. Would be a shame if something happened to it. Or him. Asterisk. The phone almost slipped from her shaking hands. They're watching him right now. Maybel. Her father's voice cracked. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I never should have taken that loan. I never should have. Stop. She forced herself to stand up straight, forced herself to think clearly despite the panic clawing at her chest. This isn't your fault. You were trying to save the business after the economy crashed. You were trying to keep food on the table. None of this is your fault. Then what do we do? Her mother whispered. Maybel looked at the destroyed shop, at her parents' devastated faces, at the message threatening her brother. She thought about Min-ho's cold fury, about the way he'd grabbed her in front of everyone, about the years of subtle control and manipulation that had led to this moment. She thought about the choice in front of her. Surrender everything and marry a man who would spend the rest of her life making her pay for this humiliation, or refuse and watch her family be systematically destroyed. I need to think, she managed. I need time to. Her phone rang. Not a text this time, but an actual call. She looked at the screen and felt her stomach drop further. It was her bank. At 7:45 on a Friday evening, her bank was calling her. She answered with trembling fingers. Hello. Miss Perkins, this is Jin-soo from Hana Bank. I'm calling to inform you that there's been unusual activity on your account. All of your funds have been frozen pending an investigation into possible fraudulent activity related to your family's business loan. What? That's impossible. I don't even. Additionally, your father's accounts have been frozen, as well as your mother's and your brother's. This is standard procedure when investigating potential financial crimes related to loan default, and this is retaliation, Maybel said, her voice sharp. This is illegal. You can't just. I'm very sorry, Ms. Perkins, but the order came from the bank's executive level with supporting documentation from Daehan Industries, who holds the primary loan. If you'd like to contest this, you'll need to file a formal complaint with our legal department, which opens Monday morning. The call ended. Maybel stood in her father's destroyed shop, holding a phone that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and finally understood the full scope of what Kang Min-ho's family was capable of. They weren't just rich. They weren't just powerful. They had the kind of influence that could reach into every corner of her life, could turn banks against her, could freeze her family's entire financial existence with a single phone call. Her mother was crying openly now. Her father looked like he'd aged another 10 years in the last 10 minutes. And somewhere across Seoul, Her baby brother was being followed by men who wanted him to know that his life could be ruined at any moment. "I'll do it," Maybel heard herself say. "I'll apologize. I'll marry him. I'll do whatever they want." "Maybel, no," her father started. "What choice do we have?" She looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "What other option is there? They've blocked our money. They've destroyed the shop. They're threatening Seojun. If I don't do this, they'll take everything. And if they can do all of this in less than 6 hours, imagine what they'll do if I actually refuse." Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Min-ho himself. "I'm a generous man. I'll give you until midnight to make the right choice. After that, I make examples out of people who embarrass me, starting with your brother's scholarship." Maybel's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Seojun's scholarship was his entire future. Without it, he'd have to drop out of university, would lose his chance at the engineering program that he'd worked so hard to get into. "Midnight," she whispered. "He's giving me until midnight." It was 7:50 now. For hours and 10 minutes to decide whether to surrender her life or watch her family be systematically destroyed. She sank down onto an overturned chair, her mind racing through options that didn't exist, through solutions that evaporated the moment she thought of them. Her mother knelt beside her, taking her hands. "We'll find another way. We'll sell the house. We'll take out new loans. There is no other way, Mom." Maybel's voice was hollow. "They own us. They've always owned us. I was just too stupid to see it before." The three of them sat in the ruins of their family business, surrounded by broken glass and broken dreams, while the clock ticked toward midnight and Maybel's phone sat silent in her lap like a bomb waiting to explode. At 8:15, her phone rang again. Maybel looked at the screen, expecting another threat, another demand, another reminder of how completely trapped she was. Instead, she saw a number she didn't recognize. Not unknown, she could see the digits, but not saved in her contacts. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her thumb the accept button, made her lift the phone to her ear. "Miss Perkins." The voice was male, professional, calm. "This is Park Jun-seo, head of security for Taehyun Holdings. Mr. Kang has requested that you and your family relocate to a secure location immediately." Maybel's brain stuttered to a halt. "What?" "Mr. Kang has been made aware of the situation involving your family's safety. He's arranged for secure transportation and accommodation. A team is currently en route to your location. They'll be there in approximately 8 minutes." "I don't understand." Maybel looked at her parents, who were watching her with confused expressions. "How does he even know?" "Mr. Kang makes it his business to be informed about threats to his employees," Park Jun-seo said smoothly. "Especially when those threats involve organized retaliation from hostile parties. The team will arrive in a black Mercedes SUV. The driver's name is Kim Dae-young. He'll show you identification. Please gather whatever essentials you need for a few days and be ready to leave immediately." "Wait. Stop. I can't just..." Maybel's voice rose in panic. "I have to give Min-ho an answer by midnight. I have to." "You don't have to do anything, Miss Perkins. Mr. Kang has made that very clear. The choice is yours. But he's offering you an alternative option that doesn't involve surrendering to coercion and threats. If you'd prefer to handle this situation on your own, that's your right. But if you'd like help, the team will be there in 7 minutes." The call ended before Maybel could respond. She sat staring at her phone, her mind unable to process what had just happened. Kang Ji-Taehyun, the CEO she'd met for the first time that morning, the man who'd worked at Taehyun Holdings for exactly 3 weeks, had somehow found out about her family's situation and was sending security to extract them. "Who was that?" her mother asked. "I think," Maybel's voice came out strangled, "I think my boss just offered us protection." Her father's eyebrows shot up. "The CEO? The one who confronted Min-ho? I don't know how he found out. I don't know why he's doing this. But he's sending security to take us to a secure location." Maybel looked at her parents, her heart hammering. "What do I do?" "You don't trust it," her father said immediately. This is Seoul. Men with that kind of power don't help people out of kindness. There's always a price. But what if there isn't? Her mother countered. What if he's just a good man who doesn't like seeing his employee being abused? There are no good men with that kind of power, her father said firmly. Whatever he wants, whatever his real motive is, it'll cost Maybel more than she can afford to pay. Maybel thought about Minho's hand on her wrist, the frozen bank accounts, the men following her brother, the destroyed shop, the midnight deadline hanging over her head like an executioner's blade. Can it possibly cost more than what Minho's already taking? She asked quietly. Before either parent could answer, headlights swept across the front of the shop. A black Mercedes SUV pulled up to the curb, its windows tinted, its presence commanding. The driver's door opened, and a man in a dark suit stepped out. He was in his 40s, built like someone who'd spent years in military service, with a face that had seen things that made him very hard to surprise. He walked to the shop entrance and held up an identification badge. Kim Dae-young, Taehyun Holdings Security. I'm here for the Perkins family. Maybel's father stepped forward. What does your employer want from my daughter? Kim Dae-young's expression didn't change. Mr. Kang wants her to be safe. He wants all of you to be safe. That's all. Nobody does something like this without expecting something in return. Mr. Kang doesn't expect anything. If you decide to leave tomorrow morning, you're free to do so. No obligations. No strings. But right now there are at least 3 surveillance teams watching this location. And your son's current residence has 2 more. Mr. Kang thought you might prefer to be somewhere those teams can't reach you. Maybel's blood turned to ice. They're watching Seo-jun right now? They were, Kim Dae-young corrected. One of our teams extracted him 15 minutes ago. He's currently in a secure vehicle heading to the same location where you'll be going. He's unharmed and was very cooperative once we explained the situation. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. You took my son without asking us? We assessed an immediate threat to a minor and acted accordingly. You're welcome to file a complaint, but I'd suggest waiting until you're somewhere with functioning locks and security cameras. Kim Dae-young's tone was professional but firm. I have orders to bring you to a secure location. I also have orders not to force you. The choice is yours. But I need an answer in the next 90 seconds because every moment we stand here increases the risk of interception. Maybel looked at her parents. Her mother looked terrified. Her father looked suspicious and angry. But underneath all of that, they both looked exhausted, worn down by years of debt and months of watching their daughter prepare to marry a man who treated her like property. If we go, Maybel said carefully, what happens when Minho finds out? He'll be very angry, Kim Dae-young said bluntly. He'll likely escalate. Which is why Mr. Kang has already taken steps to limit his family's immediate options for retaliation. But I won't lie to you. Accepting Mr. Kang's protection will be seen as choosing a side. There's no going back from that. And if we stay, then you'll need to give Kang Min-ho an answer by midnight. And based on the surveillance reports I've seen, I wouldn't recommend saying no. The weight of the choice pressed down on Maybel like a physical thing. Stay and marry Min-ho, surrendering any hope of freedom but potentially protecting her family through compliance. Or go with this stranger who claimed to want nothing in return, and hope that he was telling the truth about not having ulterior motives. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Min-ho. 3 hours and 40 minutes. I hope you're making the right decision. Maybel looked at the destroyed shop, at her parents' exhausted faces, at the message promising consequences if she didn't obey. She thought about Ji-Taehyun's cold eyes when he'd knocked Minho's hand away from her wrist, about the way he'd said, she's my employee, like it meant something, like it gave her value beyond her usefulness as a bride. We'll go, she said. But I want to talk to my brother first. I want to make sure he's really okay. Kim Dae-young pulled out a phone and made a quick call. 30 seconds later, Maybel's phone rang with a video call from Seo-jun's number. She answered to see her little brother's face, looking confused but unharmed, sitting in the back of a luxury car. Nuna, he said, using the Korean term for older sister. What's happening? These guys just pulled up and said I was in danger and I needed to come with them and… Are you hurt? Maybel interrupted. No. I'm fine. They've been really polite actually. But I don't understand. I'll explain later. Just stay with them. We're coming to meet you. She ended the call and looked at Kim Dae-young. We need to pack first. You have 5 minutes, he said. Essentials only. Everything else can be arranged later. They moved fast. Her parents grabbed clothes, medications, important documents. Maybel threw things into a bag with trembling hands, her mind still racing through the implications of what they were doing. When they emerged from the back of the shop, Kim Dae-young was waiting by the SUV, the engine running. He helped her mother into the back seat with gentle efficiency. Then her father. Maybel climbed in last, clutching her bag like a lifeline. The door closed with a solid, expensive thunk. The interior smelled like leather and subtle cologne. In the driver's seat, Kim Dae-young adjusted the rearview mirror. Seat belts, he said calmly. Then he pulled away from the curb, and Maybel watched her father's destroyed shop disappear into the Seoul night. They drove for 40 minutes, heading northeast into the hills outside the city proper. The roads got narrower, more winding, lined with trees that blocked out the streetlights. Maybel's mother held her father's hand in the back seat, both of them silent and tense. Maybel stared out the window and tried not to think about what Min-ho would do when he found out they were gone. Finally, they turned onto a private drive. High walls appeared on either side, topped with discreet security cameras. A gate opened automatically as they approached, closing smoothly behind them once they passed through. The drive continued for another 2 minutes before the house came into view. Except house was the wrong word. Estate was more accurate. Compound might be even better. The main building was modern and sprawling, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, surrounded by manicured grounds and subtle lighting. 2 smaller buildings flanked it on either side. Maybel counted at least 6 security personnel moving discreetly through the shadows. The SUV pulled up to the main entrance. Kim Dae-young got out and opened the rear doors. Welcome to Cheongdam Estate, Mr. Kang's primary residence. They were staying at the CEO's house. Maybel felt her stomach drop as the full reality of the situation hit her. This wasn't a hotel or a safe house. This was Kang Ji-Taehyun's personal home, and they were about to walk inside like guests he'd invited for the weekend. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman in her 50s appeared, dressed in a simple but elegant hanbok-style house dress. She bowed politely. Welcome. I'm Mrs. Song, the house manager. Please come inside. The interior was exactly as tasteful as Maybel expected. Minimalist furniture, expensive art, soaring ceilings. But it was warm too, lived in, with books on tables and soft lighting that made the space feel less like a museum and more like an actual home. Nuna. Seo-jun appeared from a hallway, jogging toward her with relief written all over his young face. Maybel grabbed him in a fierce hug, checking him over with her eyes to make sure he really was unharmed. I'm fine, he said, pulling back. Really? They fed me bulgogi and let me use their Wi-Fi. I've been treated like a guest, not a hostage. You're not a hostage, a voice said from the top of the staircase. Everyone turned. Kang Ji-Taehyun descended slowly, having changed from his office suit into dark slacks and a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked more relaxed than he had that morning, but his eyes were just as sharp, just as assessing. He reached the bottom of the stairs and addressed Maybel's parents directly. Mr. and Mrs. Perkins, I apologize for the abrupt nature of this evening. I'm sure this situation is confusing and frightening. Let me be very clear about your status here. You are guests. You're free to leave whenever you choose. There are no locks on the bedroom doors. Your phones will work. You can call anyone you want. Go anywhere you want. Then why are we here? Maybel's father asked bluntly. Because your daughter is my employee, and someone put their hands on her in my workplace. Because your family was being threatened as retaliation for my intervention. That makes it my responsibility to ensure you're safe, while we determine the appropriate response. What kind of response? Maybel asked, finding her voice for the first time since entering the estate. Ji-Taehyun's gaze shifted to her, and something in his expression softened slightly. That depends on what you want. If you want to marry Kang Min-ho and pretend today never happened, I'll arrange security to ensure the wedding proceeds without further harassment. If you want to end the engagement, I'll provide the legal and financial support necessary to make that possible without destroying your family. If you want something else entirely, we can discuss options. Just like that. Maybel's voice came out sharper than intended. You'll just fix everything because you feel responsible? Yes. The simple answer hung in the air. Maybel stared at him, searching for the angle, for the trap, for the hidden price that her father had warned her about. But his expression remained neutral, patient, waiting for her to process. Why? She finally asked. You don't know me. You don't know my family. Why would you risk a conflict with Daehan Industries over an employee you met this morning? Because I don't like cages, Ji-Taehyun said quietly. And you were in one. The words hit Maybel somewhere deep in her chest. She thought about the years of engagement, of carefully managing Minho's moods, of sacrificing pieces of herself to keep the peace. About how the cage had been built so slowly she hadn't realized she was trapped until the door had already locked. My family will never stop, she said, her voice rough. The debt is a tool they've used to control you. I'm aware of the original terms. I'm also aware that Daehan Industries has been charging illegal interest rates and using intimidation tactics that violate multiple financial regulations. With proper legal representation and regulatory intervention, that debt could be reduced significantly or eliminated entirely. Maybel's father straightened. You can do that? I can facilitate it. The question is whether you're willing to fight, or whether you'd prefer to accept the current arrangement. Ji-Taehyun's gaze moved between all of them. I won't judge either choice. But I want you to make it from a position of safety, not from a place of fear and immediate threat. Mrs. Song appeared with a gentle cough. Forgive the interruption, but rooms have been prepared. Perhaps the family would like to rest and discuss matters in the morning. Ji-Taehyun nodded. Of course. Mrs. Song will show you to your accommodations. They're in the East Wing with a shared living area. You'll have privacy and space. If you need anything during the night, there's a phone in each room that connects to the main desk. What about you? Maybel asked suddenly. Where do you sleep? A ghost of something that might have been amusement crossed his face. The West Wing. You won't see me unless you want to. I work late most nights and leave early most mornings. This house is large enough that you could go days without encountering me if you preferred. He was giving them space. Giving them the illusion or maybe the reality of freedom. Maybel didn't know whether to be grateful or more suspicious. Mrs. Song led them through the house, keeping up a gentle stream of commentary about amenities and house rules. The East Wing turned out to be a fully furnished apartment within the larger estate, with 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a comfortable living area. Large windows overlooked the grounds, and Maybel could see the discreet security presence continuing their patrols. I'll bring breakfast at 8, Mrs. Song said. Unless you'd prefer to sleep later? 8 is fine, Maybel's mother said quietly. Thank you. When they were alone, the 4 of them gathered in the living area. Seo-jun sat on the couch looking exhausted and confused. Their parents took the armchairs. Maybel stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself. This is insane, Seo-jun said finally. We're staying in some billionaire CEO's house because Nuna's psycho fiancé trashed Dad's shop? How is this our life right now? Watch your language, their mother said automatically, then seemed to realize how absurd that sounded given the circumstances. He's right though, their father said heavily. This is beyond anything I could have imagined. We're in debt to the Kang family. Now we're hiding in another Kang family's house. We've jumped from one dangerous situation to another. Is it though? Maybel turned from the window. Is it really just as dangerous? Because Ji-Taehyun hasn't grabbed me. Hasn't destroyed our business. Hasn't frozen our accounts or threatened Seo-jun. He's done literally the opposite of everything Minho's family has done today. So far, her father said. But we don't know what he wants yet. Men like that always want something. Maybe what he wants is to not watch his employee get abused. Seo-jun said. Maybe some people are actually just decent. In my experience, very rich people are decent right up until the moment they're not. Maybel's phone buzzed. She pulled it out with dread, expecting another threat from Min-ho. Instead, it was a message from an unknown number. Asterisk, your bank accounts have been unfrozen. The fraud investigation has been dropped due to lack of evidence. All funds have been restored with interest for the inconvenience. She stared at the message, her heart pounding. He unfroze our accounts. Her parents looked up sharply. What? Ji-Taehyun? Or someone working for him? Our bank accounts are back. Maybel's hands were shaking. He fixed it. In less than 2 hours, he fixed what Min-ho's family broke. Her father grabbed his own phone and checked his banking app. His face went pale. It's true. Everything's back. Plus, he looked at Maybel with something like awe and fear mixed together. Plus an additional transfer of 50 million won listed as emergency family assistance from Taehyun Holdings. He gave you 50 million won? Seo-jun's voice cracked. That's like $40,000. He just gave that to us. A soft knock came at the door. Maybel opened it to find Mrs. Song holding a tablet. My apologies for disturbing you. Mr. Kang asked me to deliver this information regarding your business repairs. The contractors will begin work tomorrow morning to restore the shop. All materials and labor will be covered. He estimates completion within 3 days. She handed Maybel the tablet and left before anyone could respond. Maybel looked down at the detailed repair plan, the contractor information, the timeline. Everything organized and efficient and already in motion. He's fixing the shop, she said numbly. He's already hired contractors. Her mother started crying. Not sad tears, but the kind of tears that came from emotional overload, from being overwhelmed by unexpected kindness after expecting only more pain. Her father sat frozen, staring at his phone like it might explode. Seo-jun was the first to speak. So what do we do? Do we trust this? Do we trust him? I don't know, Maybel whispered. I have no idea. Her phone buzzed again. Min-ho this time. Asterisk midnight came and went. You made your choice. Live with the consequences. Asterisk. Maybel looked at that message, at the threat and fury behind it, and then looked at the tablet showing repair plans for her father's shop, at her phone showing restored bank accounts, at her brother sitting safely on a couch instead of being followed through Seoul streets by dangerous men. I think, she said slowly, we're already living with consequences. The question is which ones we can actually survive. They stayed up until almost 3 in the morning, talking through options that all seemed impossible in different ways. Eventually exhaustion won out. Seo-jun crashed in one bedroom. Their parents took another. Maybel claimed the third but didn't sleep. She lay in the most comfortable bed she'd ever experienced, staring at the ceiling of a billionaire's guest room, and tried to understand how her life had changed so completely in less than 18 hours. At 6:30, she gave up on sleep and ventured out of the east wing. The house was quiet, just starting to wake up. She found a coffee maker in the main kitchen, and was attempting to figure out the expensive machine when a voice spoke behind her. The espresso setting is on the left. Maybel spun around to find Kang Ji-Taehyun standing in the doorway, already dressed in another perfect suit, looking like he'd slept 8 uninterrupted hours. His hair was slightly damp, and she caught the scent of expensive shampoo. I didn't mean to intrude, she said quickly. You're not intruding. You live here now. He moved past her to the coffee maker, his movements efficient and practiced. At least temporarily. How did your family sleep? Better than they have in months, probably. Maybel watched him make coffee with the ease of someone who'd done it thousands of times. Mr. Kang. Ji-Taehyun, he corrected. We're past formalities, I think. Ji-Taehyun, she amended, the name feeling strange on her tongue. I need to understand what you want from us. My father is convinced there's some hidden price. That no one helps like this without expecting something in return. He poured coffee into 2 mugs, added cream to one and handed it to her. Somehow he'd known how she took it. Your father is right to be suspicious. In his experience, power always comes with strings attached. In my experience, power is most useful when it's used to cut strings, not create them. That's a nice philosophy, but it doesn't answer my question. Ji-Taehyun leaned against the counter, his dark eyes steady on hers. I want Kang Min-ho to understand that you're not his property. I want your family to be safe from retaliation. I want you to be able to make a choice about your future without a debt hanging over your head like an executioner's blade. That's what I want. Why? The question burst out of her. Why do you care? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like old pain. 5 years ago, I watched my younger sister get trapped in a relationship with a man who used her family connections to build his career. He was charming and successful and everyone loved him. But behind closed doors he controlled every aspect of her life. What she wore, who she spoke to, where she went. By the time we realized what was happening, she was so isolated that she wouldn't accept help. Maybel's breath caught. She killed herself 3 days before their wedding. Ji-Taehyun continued, his voice perfectly controlled but his eyes betraying old grief. Left a note saying she couldn't see any other way out. That she'd rather die free than live in a cage. I'm so sorry, Maybel whispered. I don't tell you this for sympathy. I tell you this so you understand that when I saw Kang Min-ho grab your wrist in my office, when I saw the fear in your eyes and the way you tried to make yourself smaller, I recognized it. And I decided that I would never watch another woman get trapped like that and do nothing. So that's why I care, Miss Perkins. Because I failed my sister, but I don't have to fail you. The coffee mug trembled in Maybel's hands. She set it down carefully on the counter before she could drop it. What happened to him? The man your sister was supposed to marry. He's currently serving 15 years in prison for fraud and embezzlement. Once my sister was gone and I had nothing left to lose, I went after him properly. It turned out his entire career was built on stolen work and falsified credentials. My sister died protecting a man who wasn't even real. So this is revenge, Maybel said quietly. Against Min-ho, against his family, against. This is prevention, Ji-Taehyun corrected. Revenge would be destroying the Kang family completely just to make myself feel better. Prevention is making sure they can't do to you what that man did to my sister. There's a difference. Maybel picked up her coffee again, needing something to do with her hands. Min-ho's family is powerful. They have connections everywhere. Politicians, judges, police. If you make an enemy of them. They were already my enemies, Ji-Taehyun said. The Kang family of Daehan Industries and the Kang family of Taehyun Holdings have been circling each other for decades. We control different sectors of Seoul's economy. Sometimes those sectors overlap. Sometimes that creates friction. Yesterday, that friction became open conflict. It would have happened eventually anyway. You're just the catalyst, not the cause. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be honest. He checked his watch. I have a board meeting at 8. Mrs. Song will take care of anything your family needs today. There are clothes in the closets that should fit everyone. If there's anything specific you want or need, just ask. The contractors will start on your father's shop around 9. And, he paused. You don't have to come to work on Monday. You're on paid leave until you feel ready to return. I want to work, Maybel said immediately. I need normal. I need something that makes sense. Then you'll work. But if you change your mind, the option remains open. He rinsed his coffee mug in the sink, dried it, put it away with the kind of precision that suggested military training or obsessive habits. I need to leave. Are you going to be all right? It was such a strange question. Such a normal question to ask in such an abnormal situation. Maybel almost laughed. I don't know. Ask me again in a few days. I will. He left through the front door, and moments later she heard a car engine start and fade into the distance. Maybel stood alone in the massive kitchen of a man she barely knew, drinking coffee he'd made her, living in his house, under his protection, and tried to figure out when exactly her life had stopped making any sense at all. Her mother appeared around 7:30, looking better rested than Maybel had seen her in months. They made breakfast together in companionable silence, and when her father and Seo-jun joined them, they ate at the large dining table like they were on some surreal vacation, instead of hiding from a powerful family who wanted to punish them for disobedience. At 9:15, Maybel's phone rang. Her father's shop foreman, sounding confused and slightly overwhelmed. "Miss Perkins? There are contractors here. They say they're from Taehyun Holdings and they're here to repair the shop? They have a full crew and materials and I didn't call them. Did you call them?" "Yes," Maybel said. "Let them work. They're legitimate." She ended the call and looked at her family. "It's starting. He's really doing what he said he'd do. Then we need to figure out what we're doing," her father said firmly. "We can't just hide here forever. We need to make a decision." "About what?" Seo-jun asked. "About whether we accept this help and everything it means. About whether Maybel goes through with the marriage or we find another way. About whether we trust Kang Ji-Taehyun. Or whether we get out now before we're in too deep." Maybel's phone buzzed with a message from Ji-Taehyun. "Your father's shop should be operational again by Wednesday. The contractors are good. They'll work fast. Also, I've arranged a meeting with the lawyer tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss the debt situation. She's the best in Seoul. No obligation to proceed with legal action, but I thought you should know your options." She showed the message to her parents. Her mother read it twice, her expression softening. "He's very thorough. He's very controlling," her father countered. "Making decisions, arranging meetings, moving our lives around. He asked us first," Seo-jun pointed out. "He said we could leave any time. He's not making us do anything." "Not yet." Maybel set her phone down. "What if we're asking the wrong question? What if instead of asking whether we trust him, we should be asking whether we trust ourselves to make the right choice about our own future? Because right now, Ji-Taehyun is giving us options. Min-ho never gave us options. He gave us ultimatums." Her father looked at her for a long moment. "You want to end the engagement." "I want to be free," Maybel corrected. "I want Seo-jun to finish school without being followed. I want Mom to sleep without worrying about debt collectors. I want your shop to survive. And I want," her voice cracked slightly, "I want to not feel sick to my stomach every time my phone rings because I'm afraid it's Min-ho telling me what I did wrong this time." Her mother reached across the table to take her hand. "Then we end it. We take the help being offered and we end it. Mom, your father is afraid because he loves you and he doesn't want you to trade one dangerous situation for another. But I've watched you for 2 years, Maybel. I've watched you disappear piece by piece into that engagement. And I would rather risk whatever Kang Ji-Taehyun might want from us than watch you finish disappearing completely." Tears burned behind Maybel's eyes. "The debt is just money," her father said heavily. "I've been treating it like it's this massive insurmountable thing, but it's just money. We'll figure it out. We always have." "Actually," a voice said from the doorway, making them all jump, "it's not just money. It's a weapon they've been using against you for 5 years. And weapons can be taken away." They all turned to find Kim Dae-young standing there, looking apologetic for interrupting. "Sorry. Mrs. Song sent me to tell you the lawyer can meet this afternoon instead of tomorrow if you're available. She's cleared her schedule." "This afternoon?" Maybel's father looked skeptical. "The best lawyer in Seoul clears her schedule on a Saturday for us?" "The best lawyer in Seoul clears her schedule when Kang Ji-Taehyun asks her to," Kim Dae-young corrected. "She'll be here at 2. She'll bring all the relevant documentation regarding your debt, the contract terms, and the regulatory violations she's already identified. Mr. Kang thought you'd want to know exactly where you stand before making any final decisions." He left before anyone could respond. Maybel looked at her family. "So that's it then. We meet with the lawyer. We find out if there's actually a legal way out of this debt. And then we decide." The lawyer arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. Her name was Park Mi-sun, and she was exactly as intimidating as promised. Mid-40s designer suit, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Maybel's car, with eyes that looked like they'd eviscerated opposing counsel in countless courtrooms. She settled into the living area of the East Wing and opened her briefcase with efficient movements. "I've reviewed your file. The original loan from Daehan Industries, the subsequent interest accumulation, and the engagement contract that promised debt forgiveness upon marriage to Kang Min-ho. I've also reviewed the harassment claims, the property damage, and the account freezing that occurred yesterday. And Maybel's father asked, and they've violated approximately 14 different financial regulations, 3 consumer protection laws, and at least 2 criminal statutes related to intimidation and harassment. The interest rates they've been charging exceed legal limits. The debt forgiveness tied to a marriage contract is illegal under current law as it constitutes coercion. And the retaliation tactics employed yesterday are prosecutable crimes. The room went silent. In other words, Park Mi-sun continued, you don't owe them 500 million won. Based on my calculations and accounting for the illegal interest charges, you owe them approximately 80 million won. That's the principal remaining after crediting your monthly payments over 5 years at a legal interest rate. Maybel's father looked like he might pass out. 80 million? Not 500. Not 500. And even that 80 million could potentially be challenged given the nature of how the loan was structured and how payments were coerced. But let's assume for conservative purposes that 80 million is the legitimate debt. That's a manageable number. That's something that can be paid off over time without requiring anyone to surrender their freedom. How long would it take to pay off? Maybel asked. Park Mi-sun pulled out a calculator. At a reasonable interest rate and with monthly payments of 2 million won, approximately 4 years. Maybe less if your father's business starts performing better once it's repaired and no longer under threat. 2 million won a month was still a lot. But it was possible. It was achievable. It didn't require Maybel to marry anyone or sacrifice anything except time and effort. What about retaliation? Her mother asked quietly. If we challenge them legally, what's to stop them from making our lives hell? Me, Park Mi-sun said simply. And the legal system. And the media attention this case would generate if it went to court. Daehan Industries can't afford the scrutiny right now. They're in the middle of a major merger negotiation with Japanese partners who are very particular about ethical business practices. A scandal involving loan sharking, illegal interest rates, and coerced marriage contracts would torpedo that deal instantly. So we have leverage, Seo-jun said. You have substantial leverage. Which means we can likely negotiate a settlement that's favorable to your family, without requiring a lengthy court battle. I'd estimate we could have this resolved within 6 to 8 weeks. Maybel's heart was racing. 6 to 8 weeks. Less than 2 months to be completely free of the debt that had controlled their lives for 5 years. Seemed impossible. Seemed too easy. What's the catch? She asked. Park Mi-sun smiled slightly. The catch is that once we move forward there's no going back. The Kang family of Daehan Industries will know you're challenging them. They'll know Kang Ji-Taehyun is supporting you. The relationship between the two families will move from Cold War to open conflict. You'll be protected. Mr. Kang has made that very clear and has the resources to enforce it. But you'll also be choosing a side in a power struggle that's existed for decades. And if we don't move forward? Maybel's father asked. Then you're back where you started. Trapped in a debt that will never actually be repaid. With a daughter forced into a marriage she doesn't want. Living under the constant threat of retaliation if you step out of line. The choice was clear. But that didn't make it easy. Can we think about it? Maybel asked. Of course. I'm available all weekend if you have questions. Mr. Kang has already retained my services. So there's no cost to your family regardless of what you decide. After the lawyer left, they sat in silence for a long time. Finally Seo-jun spoke up. I think we should do it. I think we should fight them. You're 19, their father said. You don't understand the risks. I understand that Nuna has been miserable for 2 years. I understand that you've been working yourself to death trying to make payments on a debt that was designed to never be paid off. I understand that we've all been living in fear. And I'm tired of it. I want to fight back. Your brother is right, their mother said softly. We've been so focused on survival that we forgot we could actually live. If this lawyer is right, if there's a legal way out, we should take it. Maybel's father looked at her. What do you want, daughter? She thought about Minho's hand on her wrist. About the years of walking on eggshells. About the future she'd resigned herself to, a marriage without love. A life without freedom, years of being controlled and diminished, and reduced to nothing more than a debt payment. I want out, she said. I want to end the engagement. I want us to be free. Whatever that costs, whatever that means, I want out. Her father nodded slowly. Then we fight. We take the help being offered and we fight. They called Park Mi-sun back that evening and told her to proceed. She promised to have preliminary paperwork filed by Monday morning. After the call ended, Maybel felt like she could breathe properly for the first time in years. But that night, lying in bed in the east wing of Ji-Taehyun's estate, she couldn't sleep. Because choosing to fight Min-ho meant choosing to ally with Ji-Taehyun. It meant accepting his protection, his resources, his involvement in her life. And despite his assurances about freedom and no strings attached, Maybel couldn't shake the feeling that she was trading one form of dependency for another. She gave up on sleep around midnight and ventured out into the main house. The grounds were beautiful at night, lit by subtle landscape lighting. She found a terrace that overlooked the gardens and stood there, wrapped in a borrowed robe, trying to figure out what she was feeling. Can't sleep either? Maybel turned to find Ji-Taehyun emerging from a different door. He was still dressed, though his tie was gone and his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. He looked tired in a way she hadn't seen before. I thought you left early and came back late, she said. Usually. Tonight I had work to finish here. Conference calls with New York. He joined her at the terrace railing, maintaining a respectful distance. I heard you met with Park Mi-sun. Did she give you good news? She gave us options. Which is more than we had 24 hours ago. And you've decided to proceed? Maybel nodded. We're going to challenge the debt. End the engagement. Fight back. Good. They stood in companionable silence for a moment. Maybel searched for the right words to express what she was feeling. I need you to understand something. I'm grateful for your help. Truly. But I'm also terrified that I'm trading one cage for another. That I'm going from being controlled by Min-ho to being dependent on you. Ji-Taehyun turned to look at her. His expression serious. What would make you feel less dependent? I don't know. Clarity, maybe? About what you actually want from this situation. About what happens after the debt is resolved and my family is safe. About what role you expect me to play in your life. I expect you to work for my company if you want to continue doing so. I expect you to live wherever makes you happy once the threat has passed. I expect you to make your own choices about your future. He paused. But I won't lie and say I don't have any expectations at all. Maybel's stomach tightened. What do you expect? I expect honesty. I expect you to tell me if my help starts feeling like control. I expect you to stand up for yourself even with me, especially with me. Because the moment you start making yourself smaller to accommodate what you think I want, we've failed. His eyes held hers. And I expect hope that once you're free of Min-ho and the debt and all the immediate threats, you might choose to stay in my life not because you have to, but because you want to. As what? Maybel asked. An employee? A friend? Something else? I don't know yet. Neither do you. We barely know each other. But I'd like the chance to find out what we could be if we're both actually free to choose. It was the most honest answer anyone had given her in years. Maybel felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Okay. Okay. Okay, we figure it out as we go. But if I tell you that something feels wrong, that I need space, that I want out, then you get space and you get out. No questions, no consequences, no retaliation. You have my word. The word of a man I've known for 36 hours. Ji-Taehyun smiled slightly. The word of a man who makes it his business to keep promises. But I understand your skepticism. Trust is earned, not given. I'll work to earn it. Maybel looked out at the gardens, at the careful beauty of the estate, at the evidence of wealth and power that surrounded them. This is all very surreal. 2 days ago I was planning a wedding I didn't want. Now I'm living in a mansion, plotting legal warfare against one of Seoul's most powerful families, and having midnight conversations with the CEO about trust and expectations. Welcome to my world, Ji-Taehyun said dryly. It's always this ridiculous. Despite everything, Maybel laughed. It felt strange laughing at midnight on a terrace with a man who'd upended her entire life in less than 2 days. But it also felt good. Like maybe, possibly, there might be something resembling hope on the other side of all this chaos. I should try to sleep, she said finally. Tomorrow is going to be complicated. They all are, Ji-Taehyun agreed. But you'll handle it. You're stronger than you think. How do you know? Because you survived 2 years engaged to Kang Min-ho. And didn't lose yourself completely. Because you protected your family while being threatened. Because you're still standing here asking hard questions instead of accepting easy answers. He turned to head back inside. That's not weakness, Maybel. That's power. She watched him disappear into the house, then stood on the terrace for a few more minutes, letting his words settle into her bones. Then she went back to the East Wing and finally managed to sleep. Monday morning arrived with a crisis. Maybel's phone exploded with messages before she was even fully awake. The first was from a former colleague. Is it true? Did you really end your engagement? Maybel sat up in bed, her heart pounding. She hadn't ended it officially yet. The lawyer was filing paperwork today, but nothing had been announced. The second message was from another friend. The news is everywhere. Min-ho's family released a statement saying you broke off the engagement because you're having an affair with your CEO. Is that true? Ice flooded Maybel's veins. She grabbed her laptop and started searching. Sure enough, the story was everywhere. Major news sites, entertainment blogs, social media. All running the same headline with slight variations. Daehan Industries heir dumped by fiancé who ran to CEO's arms, or love triangle between rival families, or her personal least favorite, gold digger trades up. The Daehan Industries official statement painted Maybel as a manipulative woman who'd seduced her boss to escape a legitimate debt. It portrayed Min-ho as the victim, a good man who'd been trying to help her family only to be betrayed. And it positioned Ji-Taehyun as an unethical CEO who'd poached his employee for personal reasons. No, Maybel whispered, scrolling through article after article, each one worse than the last. No, no, no. Her door burst open. Seo-jun stood there with his phone out, looking panicked. Have you seen? I've seen it. Her parents appeared behind him, her mother looking devastated. Maybel, your phone has been ringing non-stop. News outlets want comments. Your friends are asking questions. What do we do? Before Maybel could answer, her phone rang with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Perkins, this is Kim Dae-young. Mr. Kang needs you in his office immediately. We're managing a crisis. 20 minutes later, Maybel was sitting in Ji-Taehyun's home office, still in the clothes she'd thrown on in a panic, her hair barely brushed. Ji-Taehyun stood by the window, his phone to his ear, speaking in rapid Korean with someone who was clearly getting yelled at. Park Mi-sun sat at his desk, typing furiously on her laptop. Kim Dae-young stood by the door like a sentinel. Ji-Taehyun ended his call and turned to face Maybel. He looked as calm as ever, but there was something sharp in his eyes. The Kang family moved faster than expected. They released their statement at 6 this morning to control the narrative before we could file the legal challenges. They're calling me a gold digger, Maybel said, her voice shaking. They're saying I seduced you to escape my debt. They're making it sound like you're exactly what you're not, Ji-Taehyun cut in. I know. It's a calculated move. They're trying to destroy your credibility before you can challenge them in court. If you look like a liar and a seductress, anything you say about their illegal business practices will be dismissed. Park Mi-sun looked up from her laptop. The good news is that this accelerates our timeline. I can file defamation charges along with the debt challenge. The Daehan legal team won't be expecting that. They think they're playing offense, but they just gave us ammunition. What about work? Maybel asked. What about my job? Everyone at Taehyun Holdings is going to think. Everyone at Taehyun Holdings is going to be informed of the truth, Ji-Taehyun said firmly. I'm releasing an internal statement within the hour explaining the situation in appropriate detail. You were being harassed. I intervened. Your family needed protection from retaliation. That's all anyone needs to know. But the media will print whatever gets them clicks. We can't control that. What we can control is the legal response and the factual record. He moved to sit on the edge of his desk, his attention fully on her. Maybel, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. Do you want to fight this publicly? Because we can. We can release statements, give interviews, present evidence. Or we can handle it quietly through legal channels and let the court of public opinion be what it is. Your choice. Maybel thought about her mother's face when she'd seen the news. About the way her father had looked gutted. About Sejun's panic. About her own reputation being shredded across every news site in Seoul. I don't want to hide, she said. I don't want to let them paint me as something I'm not. But I also don't want to make this worse for my family. Your family is already protected, Ji-Taehyun said. Security has been doubled. Your father's shop reopened this morning with armed guards that Daehan Industries would be insane to challenge. Your brother has a full security detail for his campus. Your mother has panic buttons and a direct line to emergency response. They can't be touched. Then I want to fight publicly, Maybel decided. I want people to know the truth. Park Min-sun smiled. Good. I'll prepare a statement for release this afternoon. We'll include documentation of the harassment, the illegal debt practices, the property damage, and the account freezing. We'll also include a statement from Mr. Kang clarifying that his intervention was professional, not personal. Is it though? Maybel asked suddenly, looking at Ji-Taehyun. Purely professional? The room went quiet. Kim Dae-young found something fascinating to look at on the ceiling. Park Mi-sun's fingers paused on her keyboard. Ji-Taehyun held Maybel's gaze. When I knocked Minho's hand away from your wrist, that was professional. When I sent security to protect your family, that was professional. When I hired the best lawyer in Seoul to handle your case, that was professional. He paused. When I stood on my terrace at midnight talking to you about trust and expectations, that was personal. Do you want me to lie about that in the statement? No, Maybel said quietly. I want honesty. Then we'll be honest. We'll say that I intervened professionally when an employee was being harassed, and that any personal connection that develops afterward is between two consenting adults and nobody else's business. Park Mi-sun started typing again. Perfect. That's exactly the tone we need. Firm but not defensive. Honest but not oversharing. The statement was released at 2 that afternoon. It was devastating in its precision. It laid out the timeline of events, included photos of Maybel's bruised wrist, provided documentation of the property damage, and attached financial records showing the illegal interest rates. It also included a quote from Ji-Taehyun. Ms. Perkins is a valued employee who was being subjected to harassment in my workplace. I intervened as any responsible employer would. The suggestion that professional protection constitutes a personal affair is insulting to Ms. Perkins and reveals more about the accuser's character than ours. We will be pursuing all legal remedies available for defamation, debt manipulation, and harassment. Asterisk. The media exploded all over again, but this time the narrative was shifting. Consumer protection groups started asking questions about Daehan Industries' lending practices. Other victims of similar loan arrangements began coming forward. The Japanese merger partners reportedly postponed their next negotiation meeting pending review of the allegations. By 5 o'clock, Daehan Industries released a second statement claiming they'd been misunderstood, that they were reviewing their internal policies, that they respected Ms. Perkins and wished her well. They're backing down, Park Mi-sun said with satisfaction. The public pressure is too much. They'll want to settle now. What does that mean for us? Maybel asked. It means we negotiate from a position of strength. It means we can probably get the debt reduced to almost nothing in exchange for you signing an NDA and dropping the harassment charges. Or we can push forward with the case and potentially send some of their executives to prison but drag this out for months. Maybel thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. I want them to pay. Not just money. I want consequences. I want other people to see that this kind of thing can't happen without pushback. Even if it means months of legal battles and media attention. Even then. Ji-Taehyun had been quiet through this exchange, but now he spoke. You're sure? Because I'm with you either way, but once we commit to this path, I'm sure, Maybel said firmly. They hurt my family. They tried to trap me in a marriage I didn't want. They're hurting other people with the same tactics. This isn't just about me anymore. Park Mi-sun closed her laptop. Then we go to war properly. I'll need full access to all documentation, all communications, anything related to the loan and the engagement. And I'll need you to be prepared for them to dig into your past, try to find anything they can use against you. There's nothing to find, Maybel said. I'm not perfect, but I'm not a liar or a gold digger or any of the things they're trying to paint me as. Good. Then we'll win. The lawyer stood. I'll start filing motions tomorrow morning. Expect things to get worse before they get better. But they will get better. After she left, Maybel sat in Ji-Taehyun's office feeling emotionally wrung out. The adrenaline of the day was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. You handled that well, Ji-Taehyun said. I don't feel like I handled anything well. I feel like I'm drowning. You made clear decisions under pressure. You stood up for yourself and for other victims. That's not drowning. That's swimming. Maybel managed a weak smile. Swimming in a very... I will. I just need a minute to... She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. Breathe, Ji-Taehyun suggested. Process? Panic quietly. All of the above. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Maybel asked the question that had been nagging at her all day. Do you regret it? Intervening when Min-ho came to the office? If you just ignored it, none of this would have happened. If I'd ignored it, you'd be married to him in less than 2 weeks, Ji-Taehyun said. Living in his family compound. Completely isolated. Completely controlled. So no, I don't regret it. Do you regret letting me help? Maybel thought about it honestly. No. I'm terrified and overwhelmed and not sure what happens next, but I don't regret it. For the first time in 2 years, I feel like I have a choice. Even if that choice is just deciding how to fight back, it's still mine. That's worth something. It's worth everything, Ji-Taehyun said quietly. Their eyes met and held. Something passed between them, some understanding or connection that Maybel couldn't quite name. It wasn't romantic exactly, though there was attraction there. It was more fundamental than that. Recognition, maybe, of two people who understood what it meant to be trapped and were choosing to be free. I should go check on my family, Maybel said, standing up. Thank you for today. For the statement and the lawyer and just all of it. You don't have to thank me every time I do something decent, Ji-Taehyun said. At some point it's going to start feeling like you're surprised by basic respect. Maybe I am, Maybel admitted. Maybe I've been settling for so little for so long that decent feels extraordinary. Then let's make decent the baseline and work our way up from there. Maybel left his office feeling lighter than she had all day. She found her family in the East Wing living room, all of them looking worried. But when they saw her face, when they saw that she was okay, some of the tension eased. They spent that evening together, talking through what the next few weeks might look like, processing the media attention, supporting each other through the overwhelming reality of what they'd committed to. And when Maybel finally went to bed that night, she slept better than she had in months, because for the first time in years, she wasn't planning her future around someone else's demands. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal meetings, media management, and slowly adjusting to life at the estate. The lawyers filed motion after motion. Daehan Industries tried to fight back, but every move they made seemed to generate more negative press. More victims came forward with similar stories of predatory lending and coerced contracts. Min-ho himself stayed quiet, which was somehow more unnerving than if he'd been making threats. Maybel kept expecting retaliation, kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. But days passed and nothing happened beyond legal maneuvering and media speculation. She went back to work the following Monday, walking into Taehyun Holdings with her head high despite the whispers. Ji-Taehyun had been true to his word. The internal statement had explained the situation clearly, and most of her colleagues were supportive. There were a few who looked at her strangely, who clearly believed the initial rumors, but they were in the minority. Life at the estate fell into a rhythm. Her father went back to running his newly repaired shop, now free from threats and harassment. Seo-jun returned to university with security that he found more amusing than frightening. Her mother started sleeping through the night again. And Maybel started to remember what it felt like to just exist without constant fear. She saw Ji-Taehyun most evenings, usually briefly. He'd stop by the East Wing to ask how everyone was doing, to update them on legal developments, to share a meal that Mrs. Song insisted on preparing for the whole household. They weren't dating. Neither of them had time or energy for that with everything else happening, but they were becoming something. Friends maybe. Allies definitely. Two people who understood each other's battles because they were fighting them together. One evening, 3 weeks after moving into the estate, Maybel found Ji-Taehyun in his study. He was working late as usual, his desk covered with papers and his computer showing multiple screens of financial data. "You're going to go blind staring at those numbers," she said from the doorway. He looked up, a slight smile touching his lips. "Probably. But the quarterly reports don't review themselves. Can they wait 20 minutes? I wanted to talk to you about something." Ji-Taehyun immediately minimized his screens and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Maybel sat down, gathering her thoughts. "Park Mi-sun says we're getting close to a settlement. That Daehan Industries is ready to negotiate seriously. I heard. That's good news." "It is. It means this might actually be over soon. The debt resolved, the engagement officially ended, my family safe." She paused. "Which means we need to talk about what happens after." Understanding crossed Ji-Taehyun's face. "You're asking about living arrangements. Among other things. You said we could stay as long as we needed to feel safe. But eventually we need to go back to our own lives. My parents can't live here forever. And I..." She stopped, not quite sure how to articulate what she was feeling. "You need to prove to yourself that you can survive on your own," Ji-Taehyun finished for her. "That you're not trading one dependency for another." "Yes. Exactly that." He nodded slowly. "I understand. And I don't want you to feel trapped here. That defeats the entire purpose." He pulled up a different screen on his computer. "I've been looking at properties. There's a building in Gangnam that Taehyun Holdings owns. The top floor is a 3-bedroom apartment that's currently vacant. If your family wanted to move there, the rent would be market rate, paid directly to the company through normal channels. No special favors. No strings." Maybel felt her throat tighten. He'd been planning for this, thinking ahead to what they'd need. That's very generous. It's practical. Your family needs a safe place to live. I have a vacant property. It's just good business." "Is it though?" "Just business." Ji-Taehyun set down the pen he'd been holding. "Do you want an honest answer or a comfortable one?" "Always honest." "Then no, it's not just business. It's me wanting you to be safe and independent, while still being close enough that if something goes wrong, I can help. It's me being selfish because I've gotten used to seeing you in the evenings and I'm not ready to give that up completely. It's me hoping that if you're not living under my roof, there might be room for whatever this is between us to become something we choose, rather than something that happened by proximity." Maybel's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. "This thing between us. What do you think it is?" "I don't know yet. But I'd like to find out. Once you're free, actually free, not just legally but emotionally, I'd like to take you to dinner. A real dinner where we're not discussing legal strategies or debt negotiations. Where we can just talk and see if we like each other when there's not a crisis forcing us together." "I think I already like you," Maybel said quietly. "You like that I helped you. That's not the same as actually liking me as a person. You've never seen me be boring or annoying or any of the other things I am when I'm not playing hero. I've seen you work until 2 in the morning and still remember to ask how Seojin's exam went. I've seen you be patient with my mother when she asks the same questions about security protocols 3 times. I've seen you eat Mrs. Song's cooking even though you clearly hate seafood, because you don't want to hurt her feelings." Maybel leaned forward. "I've seen enough to know that I want to see more. But you're right that I need to be free first. Really free. Not living in your house, not dependent on your protection, not grateful for every kindness like it's unexpected. So we wait," Ji-Taehyun said. "We wait. We get through the settlement. We get my family settled in that apartment. We establish that I can survive on my own." She smiled slightly. And then you can take me to that dinner, and we'll see if we still like each other when there's not a crisis forcing us together. I'm going to like you, Ji-Taehyun said with certainty. How do you know? Because I already do. The crisis just gave me an excuse to act on it. But the feeling was there before. It'll be there after. They looked at each other across his desk, and Maybel felt the weight of potential pressing down on them. All the things they could become if they chose to. All the ways this could work or fail or surprise them both. We're going to have to be careful, she said. The media is already convinced we're having an affair. If we actually start dating, then we'll deal with it. Together. As two adults who don't owe anyone an explanation for their private lives. You make it sound simple. It is simple. The complications are what other people try to add. But at its core, two people deciding to spend time together because they enjoy each other's company. That's the simplest thing in the world. Maybel stood up. I should let you get back to your quarterly reports. They can wait. Walk with me. They left the study together, walking through the quiet house and out into the gardens. It was late spring now, and the grounds were beautiful with blooming flowers and the sound of night insects. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the terrace where they'd talked that first midnight. I used to hate this house, Ji-Taehyun said suddenly. It felt like a mausoleum. Too big, too empty, too full of nothing but work and obligation. But these last few weeks, he stopped. It's felt different. Like a home instead of just a property. Because of my family cluttering up your east wing? Maybel teased. Because of life happening here instead of just existence. Because of your mother singing while she cooks. Because of Seo-jun asking me about business strategies like I'm someone worth learning from. Because of your father actually smiling when his shop reopened. Because of you. He turned to face her fully. Because of you not being afraid in my presence. That matters more than I can explain. Maybel reached out slowly and took his hand. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact, and she felt him go very still, like he was afraid any movement might spook her. I'm not afraid of you. I haven't been since that first night when you offered help without demands. But I was afraid of needing you too much. Of losing myself again in someone else's orbit. And now I think maybe I'm strong enough to be in someone's orbit without disappearing. Maybe I'm strong enough to let someone into mine without losing myself. But I need to prove it to myself first. Ji-Taehyun squeezed her hand gently. Then prove it. Take your time. Build your independence. Show yourself what you're capable of. I'll be here when you're ready. What if it takes longer than you want to wait? Then it takes longer. I've waited 32 years to feel like this about someone. I can wait a few more months for you to feel ready. They stood together on the terrace, hands linked, looking out at the gardens and the city lights beyond. And for the first time since this whole chaotic situation began, Maybel felt like she could see a future that she'd chosen for herself. Not perfect, not simple, but hers. The settlement came through 6 weeks later. Park Mi-sun negotiated a deal that was more favorable than anyone expected. The debt was reduced to 20 million won. Barely a tenth of what Daehan Industries had been demanding. They paid for all the damages to her father's shop. They signed an agreement to cease all contact with the Perkins family. And most importantly, they agreed to participate in a regulatory review of their lending practices that would result in policy changes protecting future borrowers. In exchange, Maybel signed an NDA about the specific details of the settlement and agreed to drop the personal harassment charges against Min-ho. She hated giving him that out, but Park Mi-sun had been clear that the bigger win was the systemic change that would protect others. Making one man suffer felt less important than that. The engagement was officially ended with a public statement that was carefully worded to avoid assigning blame, while making it clear the relationship was over. Min-ho remained silent through all of it, which Maybel took as a small mercy. Her family moved into the Gangnam apartment the week after the settlement finalized. It was beautiful and modern with proper security, and paying market rent made her father feel like they weren't accepting charity. Maybel kept her room at the apartment but found herself spending most evenings at the estate anyway, helping with work projects or just talking with Ji-Taehyun about their days. They still hadn't gone on that proper date. Both of them were busy, and Maybel was still working on feeling independent even while being in Ji-Taehyun's orbit. But the attraction was there, simmering under the surface of every interaction, waiting for the right moment. That moment came 3 months after the settlement. Maybel was working late at the office when Ji-Taehyun appeared at her desk with 2 cups of coffee and a question. There's a piano performance tomorrow night. Jazz, classical fusion. Very small venue. I have tickets. He set one of the coffees on her desk. Would you like to come with me? Maybel looked up at him, taking in the careful casual way he'd asked. The fact that he'd brought her coffee first, like he needed the excuse to approach her desk. Is this the dinner you promised? Because I should warn you, I'm very picky about restaurants. It's better than dinner. It's music and conversation and getting to see you in something other than office clothes. His eyes crinkled slightly. Though you look good in office clothes too. Are you flirting with me, Mr. Kang? I'm attempting to. Is it working? Maybel pretended to consider. Maybe. Ask me again after the concert. They went to the performance the next evening. Ji-Taehyun picked her up from the apartment in a car that he drove himself, no security detail, no formality. Just 2 people going to a concert. Maybel wore a dress she'd bought with her own money from her own paycheck, and the fact that it was her choice, her purchase, her decision made her feel powerful in a way she'd almost forgotten. The venue was intimate, maybe 50 seats, in a renovated basement space in Itaewon. The pianist was incredible, blending traditional Korean melodies with modern jazz in a way that made Maybel's heart ache. Halfway through the performance, Ji-Taehyun reached over and took her hand, and this time it wasn't comfort or protection. It was just wanting to touch her, wanting to be connected, and Maybel laced her fingers through his and held on. After the concert, they walked through Itaewon, past restaurants and bars and late-night shops. They talked about music and work and family and 100 small things that had nothing to do with debt or danger or legal battles. And when they finally stopped at a quiet cafe for actual dinner, Maybel realized she was happy. Genuinely, simply happy. You were right, she said over pasta and wine. About what? About still liking each other when there's not a crisis. I like you even more without all the drama. Ji-Taehyun smiled. I like you more too. Though I'm not sure that's possible since I already liked you quite a lot. When did you know? Maybel asked. That you liked me? The first night on the terrace. You asked me what I wanted from you, and instead of being grateful or deferential or any of the things most people are with me, you were suspicious and direct. You demanded honesty. I knew right then that I wanted to know you better. I was terrified that night. I know. But you were terrified and still brave enough to ask hard questions. That's impressive. They lingered over dinner, neither wanting the evening to end. When Ji-Taehyun finally drove her home, he walked her to her apartment door like he was a teenager instead of a billionaire CEO. Can I see you again? He asked at her door. Not as your employer or your protector or any of those other roles. Just as someone who really enjoys your company and would like more of it. Yes, Maybel said. But I have one condition. What's that? Next time I plan the date. I choose where we go and what we do. I need to prove I can do this on equal footing. Ji-Taehyun's smile was warm and genuine. I would love that. Show me your soul. I'll probably learn something. Maybel went inside feeling like she was floating. Her mother was still awake, reading in the living room, and she looked up with a knowing smile when Maybel came in. Good date? She asked in Korean. Really good date, Maybel confirmed. He's a good man. Very different from. Her mother stopped, not wanting to say Minho's name. Very different, Maybel agreed. In every possible way. She went to bed that night thinking about the future instead of the past. About the dates she'd planned and the life she was building and the man who'd helped her become free, and then given her space to actually be free. It wasn't perfect, and she knew there would be complications ahead. But it was hers. Finally, completely beautifully hers. The relationship developed slowly over the next few months. They went on dates every week, sometimes twice a week when their schedules allowed. Maybel introduced Ji-Taehyun to her favorite dumpling place in Myeongdong. He took her to a private art gallery opening. She brought him to her family's apartment for dinner. He invited her to a business gala where she met his associates and held her own in conversations about corporate strategy. They were careful about public appearances, aware that the media still loved speculating about them. But they didn't hide either. They were two adults dating, and anyone who had a problem with that could deal with it themselves. 6 months after that first concert, Ji-Taehyun asked Maybel to move back into the estate. Not to the East Wing but to the West Wing. To his space. To share his life properly instead of dancing around it. "I know this is fast," he said when he asked. "And I know you value your independence. But I'm tired of saying goodnight at your door and driving home alone. I'm tired of waking up without you. I want mornings together and evenings together. And all the boring middle parts together." Maybel thought about it for exactly 1 day before saying yes. Because she'd proven to herself that she could survive alone. She'd built her independence, established her own life, and become the person she needed to be. Now she was ready to choose partnership from a position of strength instead of necessity. Moving into the West Wing felt like coming home. Her family approved. They'd grown to love Ji-Taehyun as much as she had. Seo-jun joked about finally getting to raid the estate's library whenever he wanted. Her parents were just happy to see her happy. 1 year after that first morning when Min-ho had grabbed her wrist in the office, Maybel stood in Ji-Taehyun's study looking at a document that Park Mi-sun had sent over. It was a letter from Daehan Industries' legal team, informing them that Min-ho had moved to Singapore for work and would not be returning to Seoul. The implication was clear. He was gone and he wasn't coming back. "It's really over," Maybel said, looking at the letter. Ji-Taehyun came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "It's been over for a while. This is just the final confirmation. I used to imagine what this moment would feel like. Being completely free of him, of the debt, of all of it. I thought I'd feel triumphant or relieved or something big. What do you feel?" "Nothing. He just feels irrelevant. Like he was part of a different person's life." She turned in Ji-Taehyun's arms. "The person I am now doesn't have room for him, even in memory." "Good. That's how it should be." He kissed her forehead. "Do you know what I want?" "What?" "I want to marry you." Maybel's breath caught. They'd talked about the future in abstract terms, but this was concrete. This was real. "Is this a proposal?" she asked. "It's a statement of intent. The actual proposal will be better. I'm just letting you know where my head is so you're not surprised when I eventually do it properly." Maybel laughed. "You're terrible at romance." "I'm excellent at romance. I'm just also practical." His expression grew more serious. "But I mean it, Maybel. When you're ready, when we're both sure, I want to marry you. Not because of debt or obligation or protection, but because I love you and I want to build a life with you." "I love you too," Maybel said. "And I think I might be ready sooner than you expect." Yeah. He kissed her then, properly, the kind of kiss that made her forget they were standing in his study in the middle of the afternoon. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "So how long do I have to wait for this proper proposal?" Maybel asked. "Give me 2 weeks. I need to do it right. You don't need grand gestures. I need to show you that I know you, that I pay attention, that I love you for who you actually are, not who I need you to be." 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, Ji-Taehyun woke Maybel up at dawn and told her to get dressed for a drive. He wouldn't tell her where they were going, just that she should dress comfortably and bring a jacket. They drove for 2 hours outside Seoul, into the mountains where the air was cooler and the landscape turned wild. Finally, they reached a small traditional Korean house, the kind that had been converted into a cultural center. A sign identified it as a restored Yongbyon residence from the Joseon era. "This is where my sister used to come," Ji-Taehyun said as they got out of the car. "When she needed to think, to breathe, to remember who she was outside of everything else. She brought me here once about a month before she died. Said it helped her feel grounded." Maybel took his hand. "You've never brought me to a place connected to her before." "I know. I wasn't ready before. But now." He led her into the house, through rooms filled with traditional furniture and artifacts, until they reached a back garden that overlooked a valley. "Now I want you to know all of me, including the parts that still hurt." They sat in the garden, and Ji-Taehyun told her more about his sister. About her dreams and her fears and the woman she'd been before the man she loved had destroyed her. It was the most vulnerable Maybel had ever seen him. And she held his hand and listened and loved him more for trusting her with this pain. When he finished talking, he pulled a small box from his pocket. My sister told me something that last day we came here together. She said that the right person won't feel like a cage, even on the hardest days. They'll feel like the door that leads outside. He opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band with a single diamond. You're my door, Maybel. You led me out of the isolation I'd built around myself. You showed me that protection doesn't have to mean control, that love doesn't have to mean possession. Will you marry me? Not because you need me or I need you, but because we choose each other. Maybel was crying, but they were good tears. Healing tears. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her specifically. Because it had. He'd had it designed based on sketches of what she'd mentioned liking in passing conversations she probably didn't even remember having. They stayed in the mountains until sunset, talking about wedding plans and the future, and all the small details of a life they'd build together. When they finally drove back to Seoul, Maybel looked at the ring on her finger and thought about how far she'd come from that morning when Minho had grabbed her wrist. She'd been in a cage then. Now she was free. And she'd chosen to share that freedom with someone who understood that love meant keeping the door unlocked. Always. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the estate. Just family and close friends, nothing grand or showy. Maybel's father walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Her mother sobbed through the vows. Seo-jun served as a groomsman and made a speech that had everyone laughing. Ji-Taehyun stood at the altar in a traditional hanbok, and when Maybel reached him he whispered, "You look like freedom." "So do you," she whispered back. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They wrote their own vows, speaking about choice and partnership and the kind of love that made both people stronger. When they kissed, it felt like every promise they'd made to each other was sealed. The reception was held in the estate gardens, under strings of lights and surrounded by people who genuinely loved them. Park Mi-sun gave a toast about how Maybel was the only client who'd ever made her cry happy tears. Kim Dae-young made a dry joke about hoping he'd have fewer crisis calls now that they were married. Mrs. Song presented them with a traditional Korean wedding chest filled with wishes written by all the staff. And Maybel's father, the man who'd been so afraid to trust Ji-Taehyun at the beginning, stood up and said, "I used to think powerful men always wanted something. I was wrong. Sometimes powerful men just want to use their power to protect instead of control. Thank you, son, for protecting my daughter when I couldn't." Ji-Taehyun had to discreetly wipe his eyes after that one. They danced late into the night, surrounded by love and laughter and the promise of a future they built together. And when they finally retreated to the West Wing, leaving the celebration still going in the gardens, they stood at the window overlooking the grounds and held each other. "No regrets?" Ji-Taehyun asked. "Not a single one," Maybel said. "You. Only that I didn't knock his hand away sooner." Maybel laughed and kissed him. "We got here eventually. That's what matters." They stood together at the window, watching their families and friends celebrate below, and Maybel thought about the journey that had brought them here. About the cage she'd escaped and the door she'd found. About the man who'd offered help without demands and then loved her without conditions. She'd started this story as Maybel Perkins, a woman trapped by debt and fear and obligation. She was ending it as Maybel Kang, a woman who'd chosen her own future and built her own freedom. And that, she thought as she leaned into her husband's embrace, was the best ending she could have imagined. Years later, when people asked how they met, Maybel would smile and say, "He knocked away someone who was hurting me. And then he spent the next year proving that protection doesn't have to mean possession." And Ji-Taehyun would add, "She taught me that the strongest cage is the one you build yourself. And the bravest thing you can do is let someone help you break it." Their story became one of those legendary romances in Seoul's business circles. The waitress and the CEO. The debt and the rescue. The cage and the key. But for Maybel and Ji-Taehyun, it was simpler than that. It was just two people who'd both been trapped in different ways, finding each other and choosing freedom together. And in a city full of power plays and strategic marriages and relationships built on anything but love, that was revolutionary enough. You just watched Maybel go from hiding behind a counter, trapped by debt and fear, to standing at her own wedding as a woman who chose freedom. That's 16 chapters, 84 scenes, one complete transformation. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of her fight for freedom, subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Because every week I bring you journeys that hit this hard. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Let's build a community that believes in stories where the underdog doesn't just survive, they win.